nice to have some dedicated. But you know, where the house is, it's going to have a 25-foot buffer in the front. The bluff and the ocean is along the front. That side where the rain garden is in the lake, again, that's the high ground, and below that is my lot 234, which is much low ground, low ground, and it has some reeds and the like in that. And then, as I explained, the lot on the back, which is owned by the town, it's wet on the storms. Like when you go there in the summer, when you go there other times, there's no water in it at all. But there's no reeds in there generally. It's like one area, one spot that has it, but it's like it made sense, and it's looking at the lot, move things away from the ocean, and basically move it back. So I have basically 17 feet on that left side to low ground, and instead of a 20 feet in the front, to have 12.5 feet, and then come to the city right away, easement to the street. There was a lot of time ever I personally spent. I got to tell you, maybe 2 to 3 months my time. My background is Massachusetts tax and corporate attorney. I've dabbled in some other things. I'm a self-practicing guy. It's 30 years, and I learned a lot about reading like the regulations to try to understand what I was dealing with here. And from the very beginning, a lot more complexity than what I originally anticipated in the beginning, but I did my absolute best with it. And I do think what I've done is a reasonable proposal. And I stand on everything that I wrote in my detailed comments that I worked very hard on. And I respectfully ask you to please.
Any questions of the applicant? Any questions? I know. Gonna pause a minute. Just zoom. Anyone? Lost the Zoom connection for about a minute. The meeting went down for everyone. Back. We good? Okay. All right, John, based on the comments made by Mr. MacSWEENEY, anything to add from your perspective?
Well, one thing I would like to note, did point out that we wouldn't mind reducing scale of the deck. But when this application came in, it was originally deficient because it didn't have all some other things that were necessary to be accepted. And as part of the deficiency, I spelled out as currently designed, this project forwarded to the council as a denial recommendation because it was so variant and it conflicts with the intent of the program. And you know, often in some projects, there's middle ground to be found where you sit down and you say, okay, we can downscale this, we can reconfigure it. Sometimes there are engineering solutions. Unfortunately, I feel at this site, it's so massively variant and it's surrounded by a coastal feature that reducing the scale doesn't make it meet the requirements of the program. I know Mr. MacSWEENEY pointed out that he felt that the wetland area was flooded only in storm events, but it's coastal wetland, meets the definition of coastal wetland. And it's not just a drainage swale, it's coastal wetland, which again, as I pointed out in my report, the coastal council designates in type 2 water shall have, even if a variance is being granted, a minimum of 25-foot buffering. And there is none provided. The only buffer is between the flags 1 through 5. And that's on the eroding coastal bluff. And the flags between 5 and 10 are still an eroding bluff. There's no buffer provided. And there's no buffer on the coastal wetland, which again, the council has designated some extra protection. And as far as the rain garden being 2 feet from an eroding bluff, my feeling is, in my experience, if you're eroding all the rooftop runoff into a rain garden that's 2 feet from an eroding bluff, it's not getting the treatment that a rain garden is intended and designed to provide. And it's also subject to that 1.8 foot annual erosion, 2 feet away. So I just feel that, you know, like I said, often you sit down and you try to find a way to minimize the impacts and find the middle ground with something more palatable that I could hang my hat on and say, okay, it meets the program. In this instance, I didn't find that the site is suitable for development. When you're asking for 100% variance buffer and setback, that doesn't meet the intent, and it doesn't meet the mission of stated mission to protect the wetlands and features. And so I just felt like reducing the scale doesn't bring it to the point where it would then say that it meets the requirements of the program. And sometimes we support as staff setback relief when it's like, okay, it's a tight site, but it's not subject to intense erosion and flooding. And that's in a case where it's like, okay, we're providing the maximum amount of buffer that we possibly can. So, okay, we'll take a little bit less of the setback to provide more buffering. In this case, it's 100% variant, both of those sections of the program, where it's supposed to be 75 feet, 50 of buffer and 25 of setback. And on the wetland side, the dwelling's 12 feet from the coastal feature. And as I pointed out, the limit of disturbance on the wetland side of the project is the coastal, putting your erosion controls on the coastal feature. You're also excavating and installing pilings for the foundation, 12 feet from the wetland. That's going to be hard to accomplish, especially with the grading apron that goes around that, bringing it up to 8.5 feet. If you look at the site plan, in one of those areas, it's 5 feet. So you can put 3.5 feet of fill that close to the wetland edge. To me, it's just, there was no way to slice it up that I could say that, okay, this meets the requirements of the program and support a variance to.
Do you have an opinion if there's anywhere on the property that could sustain this structure within regulations?
Concern is that with the high ocean, again, I submitted a couple of aerial photos just as an example. If you review them, the shoreline change maps show that amount of erosion, 90-something feet from 1939 to 2003. But if you look at the aerial photos since 2003, even like the 2008 photo that's in my package, there's a significant amount of erosion on that shoreline that is lost just in that period. And I just feel like, okay, on that side, you've got a serious erosion threat. On the other side, you have coastal wetlands that's inundated in storms. And I think as we've all seen, that 24 storm was a really bad one. But I think we've all seen it in our experience that the frequency and intensity of these storms is increasing. And you look at the elevations of the site, and basically in a big storm event or king tide, this thing is going to be surrounded by water on 3 sides and potentially even the street front. Look at the storm tools models, and that site is going to be significantly inundated a large storm event in not too far in the future. And so, like I said, normally I always pride myself in finding the middle ground and finding, okay, here's a way where we can do this. We can use the scale. Sometimes you get a greater variance from the city to push it closer to the road. I just don't see there's any way on this site to put any kind of dwelling there without it being threatened by storm for even a 30-year design life, but also to have the negative impacts on the water quality, because there's essentially going to be no treatment, rain garden, application, or anywhere on the site. So it's a negative impact of water quality. It's a potential threat to the surrounding area just as far as exacerbating. Yes, the house will be on pilings up in the air, but there's other infrastructure at the site, parking vehicles there and associated pollution that comes from that. And with frequent inundation, I just feel it's certain that it's going to have negative impacts on water quality and be in conflict with the regulations. And that's why, like I said, I couldn't find a way to, from any angle, to see that the variance could be supported and still be consistent.
Okay, in your first presentation, you made reference to, if not a dwelling, there may be some other permittable use. Is that correct?
Yeah, like a recreational use or something like that.
Such as?
I mean, people use them. I mean, people sometimes just want a parking spot. I mean, even that, it could be inundated and flooded in a storm. So I don't even know if that's a great idea, but people use them as a place where you could, store kayaks and, have other recreational uses of the site.
Any questions of Sean on that second update? Sure, would you like to address the comments?
So we're talking about the bluff and the rain garden. The bluff is along the ocean front. That's the bluff. With a rain garden, there isn't a bluff there. There's 7 to 8 feet of land. There's some trees as a buffer, some decent sized trees, and then it goes down to my lot 234. There was in combined, which has some reeds and the like in that. So it's not on the bluff there. It's not on the bluff. It's in the back corner. The area that you developed with the home, physical footprint of the home does have 25 feet from where the home sits to where the bluff, the eroded bluff sits, based upon the NRS wetlands marking, which is the detailed report.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. You need to repeat it. The NRS wetlands marking.
Report marking the wetlands, which is his report is within it was dated January 2024. A month or so ago.
Just to clarify, Mr. Avenue's report identified the area from flag 1 to 10. He identified that area, right, the rain garden is as the eroding bluff.
It goes across the front, which is why when I situating the locus of the home, that it's situated in front of the area that does have the 25, and not the area that has less than that, because it didn't make it in the design. It didn't make sense to try to do it. And my understanding is our case is that CRMC it's in the variance granted in our case that there's been nothing granted about less than that front to the piece. So I'm working with the property, putting it in to mitigate the maximum space that I have to mitigate risk and flood and any. I would, in terms of the bluff itself, I would be. I was advised that I probably should not to do it in a single application, but I would, whether it be even pieces of granite, something about better, but some type of shoreline protection, I would be willing to put money into that to try to do something to make it look better there, and also protect on a longer term basis the bluff itself from eroding and clean it up, and not have like this commingling of trees that are down. So, but it's, the minute I want to get a home there. I didn't spend that amount of money to have parking spaces or kayak storage. It's the idea is that it's going to get something that works in the footprint. It falls within the parameters of the. In my read and as I've written in my write-up, I think that it does. And you also mentioned your report bit about the things that weren't included. So that originally I didn't have the letter from the sewer department at that point. And I also didn't have this, I think the zoning. I'm sure I had the zoning order for this thing back. So and I have the letter somewhere, and in my recollection of it was that you told me that in order for you to be given an affirmative recommendation, that I had to have these other things laid in there. In part, you could say that it would recommend a denial. I have no recollection of that.
Well, I have it.
In the document.
But before we get to the back and forth on this, I think you both have made very good presentations. But you know, the application that the board has before it is the one that we have to make the determination on, not what may be able to get there or anything else. So I think we're at the point now where the board can start deliberating on this.
Okay.
To see whether or not this particular application should be approved.
Thank you.
Can I add one? It's type 2 shoreline. And so you mentioned putting the revetment of granite. We encourage only non-structural shoreline protection type 2 waters. So again, by permitting this project, be ready for a category B coming in for an armored revetment as soon as it's constructed.
No. Don't, you know, here's the thing. I don't want to start talking about things that are not
Even
part of this application. The board's got enough on its hands.
Any questions at this point from the council to the applicant? Is there anyone else present this evening that wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone present this evening that wishes to speak in opposition of the application? You can come forward, sir.
Stand.
It's fine to stand, but I'm going to swear you in. Please raise your right hand.
Oh, yeah.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Full name is Christopher Dodge, CHRISTOPHER, last name DODGE.
I don't mind if you want to pull a chair up if you're more comfortable sitting.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, council members, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Chris Dodge. I'm the Narragansett Bay Community Participant today. I'm the one that wrote the letter that was submitted to you and as part of the council packet in front of you. Wanted to use the opportunity to just address you verbally about some of our written comments, although many of them mirror what was shared by Mr. Feely. Did a much better job than I on some of these, but I did just want to get the opportunity to be here and speak. So just wanted to start first with, again, what's listed in the public notice that this property being surrounded by 3 sides by a coastal feature consisting of the coastal wetland and on the west and south side, and that erosive coastal bluff in Narragansett Bay on the east. As we've been talking about, there's no construction setback proposed for this property, requiring a 100% setback variance. And as it pertains to the buffer setback, the public notice does state that, you know, a buffer zone of 25 feet is proposed on one portion of one side of the coastal feature, but there's no buffer zone proposed both on the west side and south side, and a small portion of the east side along the coastal bluff there. So, meaning again that this would require up to 100% of a variance on the majority of the property under construction. State of the Bay understands and appreciates the need for occasional, often minimal variances in order for to the regulations, in order to allow for approval of projects in some locations to successfully meet the necessary standards for those variances. But the allowance of 100% variance of our state's coastal regulations would erode away at the efficacy of those regulations, the program that administers them and regulates them, and the important environmental functions that they are, all regulations in the program meant to protect. To me, would beg the question that, why do we even have regulations if we're offering 100% variance setbacks or setback variances to many of them? Permitting such expansive variances would also not meet the council's goal to, quote, provide the maximum coastal buffer zone widths for projects abutting coastal wetlands that are adjacent to type 1 and type 2 waters, as mentioned by Mr. Feely and outlined in Red Book section 1.2.2 C1H. It also fails to honor the, quote, establishment of a coastal buffer zone, which is based upon CRMC's legislative mandate to preserve, protect, and where possible, restore ecological systems. 1.11. As mentioned by Mr. Feely as well, we also contend that the application fails to meet many of the 6 qualifications in order to be granted variances in accordance with 1.1.7a, naming a couple 1.1.7a2, that the proposed alteration will not result in significant adverse environmental impacts or use conflicts. As we mentioned in our letter, documented with pictures and also mentioned by Mr. Feely, the property is often already flooded during coastal storms, rain events, moon tides, both by Narragansett Bay to the east and from the freshwater precipitation down the street and from the coastal wetland there. Inundation of this property and its wetland serve to help to mitigate additional flooding moving around the neighborhood to the road, to other properties and things like that. So to allow for fill and building on the property and in portions of the wetland would exacerbate that coastal flooding to surrounding properties and habitat. That degradation has already been started without your ability to weigh in on it through the legal alterations of the property by bringing in of gravel just to park a car there, let alone what will be necessary in order to build on the property. We documented that in figure 1, which was part of our letter that's in the packet, and it is part of the CRMC cease and desist order 230265. Additionally, section 1.1.7A4 states that the modification requested by the applicant is the minimum variance to the applicable standards necessary to allow a reasonable alteration or use of this site. This is absolutely not the case. Is anything else smaller than what is proposed would result in at least some decrease in requested variance from the 100% in most cases that's being requested. So anything with a smaller footprint and less or no fill, similar to staff's report, which mentioned things like accessory or recreational use of the property, would result in less of a variance. All of that is just speaking strictly to the deficiencies regarding variances, but in addition to this, according to CRMC's shoreline change map, and again, as mentioned by Mr. Feely, the shoreline area has experienced on average 1.8 feet of coastal erosion during the period of 1939 to 2003, documented in that change map that continues since 2003. If you look at the town plat maps as provided in our letter as well, there's a whole bunch of plots along in the water, in the bay, and a road that are gone already. We can assume, barring nothing has changed with regards to sea level rise, frequency of coastal storms, those processes are going to continue at the rate of at least 1.8 feet. In CRMC's policy 1.2.2 C1I ties the fact of this erosion nicely into some of the requests for variances earlier that I was mentioned for the buffer zone, when it states that protection of a buffer zone consists for projects, quote, budding coastal wetlands that are likely, based on conditions at the site and best available information, to migrate forward with sea level rise. And that this buffer zone, the goal is to provide protected upland areas that may transition to coastal wetlands in the future. So by granting 100% variance, you are of the buffer zone setback, you're removing the possibility for migration of beach and coastal wetland to a more upland area, essentially kind of choking it off. So I'll leave those, more I could say, but I'll leave my words at that and just urge you to deny the application as proposed, and as recommended by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Dodge? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else present this evening that wishes to speak in opposition of the application? Okay. Is the council in a posture for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion based on the staff report presentation to support the staff's position and recommend denial of this application.
The motion has been made by Mr. Flynn to deny for the reasons that he indicated. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion has been made and seconded to deny the the application. Is there any discussion?
Just like to say that I think that the magnitude of the variances to the buffer zone and the setback requirements are just off the charts, and that this project should not go forward. I think that the staff did a great job in outlining the issues. And then for those reasons, I'll be voting in favor of the motion to deny.
Okay. I have a question of Mr. Flynn. Would you be amenable to adding that it's without prejudice? The denial without prejudice.
Which you mean the applicant could come back with another application? Or
With something that would be significantly different, but it wouldn't bar him from coming back with something that might state that correctly.
That's correct, yeah.
yeah, I would. I don't know if it's feasible because it's really not a very large footprint of a house. And having been out to the site myself since I live in it, and seeing a portion of the site underwater a few days ago, I don't know if it's feasible, but I'm not the one designing the house on that site, so. So I would have that.
So you would amend your
Yeah.
motion, does it have to restate it?
No.
Okay. So the motion has been amended to recommend a denial without prejudice. Mr. Gagnon, do you still wish the second with the amendment? So before us, we have a motion to deny without prejudice. I will hold the council. Mr. Flynn?
Aye.
Mr. Izzy?
Aye.
Mr. Russolino?
Aye.
Dr. Ruder?
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon?
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds?
I appreciate all the hard work that the applicant did, but I do agree.
I too, Raymond Coy, vote aye. So it's been denied, but without prejudice. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gonna take a 5-minute recess before we get to the next matter. So take a 5-minute break. You good? Yeah. All right, we're back on the record on Tuesday, March 10, 2026, State of Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council. Next matter is an administrative application before the full council for review and action, bearing the number 2025-10-075, Crohn's Family Revocable Trust, to reconstruct a revetment on an underdeveloped barrier beach abutting type 1 waters by exchanging existing stone with 350 to 400 tons of larger armor stones up to 7.2 foot in diameter within the footprint of the existing revetment, parentheses detailed in ascent 1993-03-062, close parentheses period. Work also involves removing and replacing in-kind undermined patio sections and concrete beach access stairs located at plat 175, lot 17, 25 Atlantic Avenue in Westerly, Rhode Island. And I see that the parties on this application are present at the table before us. And before we do anything, well, if you want to swear them, you can swear them. If anyone's going to testify.
Anybody that may be testifying, please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please state your names and spell them for the record.
Merrill Crones, CHRYS.
James Crones, JAMS.
That's previously. And Peter Squires, PETRSKWIRZ, counsel for Jim and Cheryl Crones from Revocable.
Okay.
So
At this time, I'm just going to ask Attorney DeSisto if you can give us a update or briefing.
thank you, Mr. Chair. This application before you is styled by the applicant as a maintenance permit. And you know, if it's not a maintenance permit, this is not a permitted use for what is requested. On that basis, the applicant has filed for maintenance permit for this project. So that is a predicate issue that needs to be determined. Your staff has made the determination that this is not a maintenance permit. So to me, the issue that needs to be addressed immediately is whether or not this is a maintenance permit. If it isn't a maintenance permit, then the application is denied. They can't apply for it. And that is the position that staff has taken on this. So I think in order to make that determination, you should hear from staff first on the issue. And I'm sure that the applicant, through their engineer, will have some comments. And then you can make a determination as to what type of an application this is.
Any questions of Attorney DeSisto from the council? Okay.
Yeah.
Rich, you have this one to lead?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the project site is located at the approximate western terminus of Atlantic Avenue in Westerly. Postal feature at the site is a undeveloped barrier beach with a riprap revetment as its secondary controlling coastal. There have been 14 relevant CRMC ascents for the project. The latest ascent was 2024-10-47 for restacking the revetment and allowing for 50 tons of stones, as undersized stones, that in staff's opinion could be projectiles in a storm event. And so they were like less than 2 feet or less size stone. This application is to exchange up to 400 tons or 800,000 pounds stone, up to 7 feet, approximately 7 feet diameter. The design engineer has stated that the stone replacement is necessary to build the structure in accordance with the Army Corps of Engineers Coastal Engineering Manual. Staff agrees that this is a requirement for new construction shoreline protection, but is not a requirement of the Rhode Island Coastal Resource Management Program for maintenance shoreline protection. It is staff's opinion that the proposed work does not qualify as a maintenance activity. Also, the executive director who has reviewed the application has also determined the project requires a coastal ascent and does not qualify as a maintenance activity. Really. The applicant disagrees that the scope of work exceeds maintenance activity, and therefore the project is being presented to the Coastal Council for a decision on this matter. Other concerns of staff is that the proposed work will create more reflective surface, increasing erosion in front of the wall, seaward wall. Along that wall, there is lateral access during low tide events and also low wave energy. But during higher tides, it is inundated tidal waters. There is objections to this project from the Save the Bay, Town of Westerly, and members of the community. Quickly, Save the Bay objection is that the structure will interfere lateral access, and the project is beyond a maintenance activity. Town of Westerly was concerned with construction impacts from the importation of large stone. The community objectors were concerned that the work was beyond scope of maintenance and will impact lateral access also. In particular, Mr. Pellizola and Mr. Weber, the objectors have stated that the private right-of-way be converted to a public right-of-way if this project was approved. Staff concurs with the Save the Bay and community objections. Staff does confers to legal counsel if the private right-of-way could actually be converted if the project was approved, converted to a public. In conclusion, staff agrees that this wall will need periodic maintenance. Needed 14 cents already since 1993, so it's almost once every 3 years approximately they need to maintain this wall. And then, you know, this is based on prior history, and also the fact that this site is located on a highly exposed and seaward stretch of undeveloped barrier beach. It's staff's opinion and the director's opinion that the work does not qualify as maintenance activity, and therefore the proposed project is considered new work, which is prohibited per RI, the Rhode Island Coastal Resource Management Program 1.3.1.3.3 parentheses A, shoreline protection. Paraphrasing this section, the council shall prohibit new structural shoreline protection on undeveloped barriers and shorelines abutting type 1 waters. Therefore, it is staff's conclusion that this project be denied.
Any questions of Rich?
Yes, I have a question, Reggie. What is it specifically about this proposed project that makes it not maintenance as opposed to maintenance?
Well,
Is it the scope, the amount of the stones,
it's
the size of the stones,
Yes,
placement of the stones?
it's the increase in the size of the stone. They have about maybe 5 foot, now they're doing 7 foot, and the amount of stone extreme. They're going to 800,000 pounds of stone replacement. So it's beyond what is considered a maintenance activity.
So it's increasing the size and the scope of the event.
The actual stone size is going to increase. The footprint's going to stay the same, but the stones themselves are going to increase from a smaller stone to larger stones.
So instead of having 10 pound stones, you're gonna have one
100-pound stone.
Right, well, not that was.
Just to simplify
Right.
it for us simple people. Okay, but they're gonna stay in the same footprint that the current
Yes,
stone embeddment is in? Okay. Will they be raising the height
no,
there? Okay. So it's just the size of the stones.
correct. We have a lot of these projects that come in that have these small stones and they're undersized. And we do not allow for them to increase the size of these stones as a maintenance activity. The big problem with this site is it's type 1 waters and it's an undeveloped barrier. That's really what's kicking it. The big problem is it's prohibited to put a new revetment in this location.
Does the size of the stone in the revetment impact the ecology?
Well, that's that's where I said that the size of the stone is going to have so because we're gonna have such large stone, you're actually gonna have less voids and you're gonna have a more reflective base to this wall. So you're gonna have a more erosive base where people use that lateral axis in front of that wall that may disappear fairly quickly.
It's almost like pouring a concrete wall.
It'll be more solid structure. Engineering wise, it's better, but it's not better for lateral access.
And what about the erosion? What wouldn't happen?
It would most likely increase.
Yes, Mr. Flynn.
So I'm assuming the applicant would want to do this because they probably get tired of replacing smaller stones every couple of years. And they feel that a larger stone would stand up better. Would you?
I would, yes, I would.
So as I'm looking at the part of the presentation that was submitted to us, the controlling legal standard is whether the design, purpose, or size of the structure is significantly altered. Well, the purpose of the structure would not be, I don't think, significantly altered. The purpose is to protect that house, right?
Yes.
But I guess you could argue that the design or size, because of the type of stone, is being altered.
Right. That's what.
Could an argument also be made that a larger stone is less likely to be hurled, to be tossed?
Yes, but the side stone,
Tossed at the house, I guess.
right, but the side stone they have out there are not going to, they're significant size stone. You see the photos.
So they're not likely to get.
No, and that's why we gave them a 50-ton replacement to replace these small 2-foot size stones. So they wouldn't end up being projectiles.
So are the replacement stones significantly larger than the stones that are there now?
Yes.
Yeah. But they want larger stones, want the replacement stones that you're recommending.
They want larger stone. They want larger stone and more significant.
But not more in terms of total tonnage of stone. Is that correct?
I'm not following that.
In other words, are they replacing the same tonnage of stone with new stone?
Not completely replacing the whole.
So what they're taking out
They're going to replace
with larger stones, but not more tonnage.
tonnage wise.
That's what I
It might
thought.
be,
I gleaned from their application. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes,
A few times you mentioned that the larger stones would have an impact on lateral access. Could you explain why that would be?
yes, it's what's going to happen, in my opinion, is that the larger stone is going to make a more reflective base to that wall, because it's instead of voids in that wall, which allows for waves to, go into the wall. Now you've got a reflective wall. You're gonna end up with erosion in front of that wall because it hits up the solid wall and it causes erosion.
Tom, do you have anything to add at this point?
Yes, if I may. I suppose to add on to what Rich was saying, one of our primary concerns with this revetment specific is that it has very large voids and cavities. If you maintain the same toe and the same height of the revetment, and instead you start adding in all these stones as they are requesting to do, they are looking to construct a keyed-in revetment, not a dumped, voided revetment. They are looking for a solid revetment. I do not believe that this revetment will, one, be single time, and two, I'm concerned of it. And something that we haven't quite mentioned yet is that the wall has already been started, and the section that was started was infilled with small stone, even though that was not allowed in the previous descent from 2020. So I guess what I would like to just simply add here is that, yes, the largest stone is going to be in here, but the intent is that this will become a solid wall. And those voids are very likely to be filled. And how this plan presents shows that the revetment would be a filled revetment and the voids would be infilled.
Questions? Tom, from the council?
On page 39 of the handout, the left side looks like there's lateral access problem and possibly high tide, and on the right side of that page, maybe low tide. And so my question is that there already a lateral access problem at high tide?
Yes, there is. At high tide, it's impassable. At low tide, people can pass. And it also depends on the sand accretion, different times of year. There's more sand, for example, during some of the winter months, it's easier to traverse.
I ask?
Yes?
Legal questions. So we really are not looking at the merits of the larger stones or the smaller stones. We're making a decision whether or not this is considered maintenance first. Is that true?
That's correct. But the question is whether or not the application as proposed is maintenance. And one of the factors is the size of the stones. It's one of the factors.
Okay. Any further questions from the council, of our staff, or our council?
Yeah, just remind me, what are the other factors that make it maintenance or not?
What's in the staff report?
Yeah, well, tell me what page it's on.
Okay. I'm looking at the red book, and in the definitions 83, maintenance of structures means the reconstructing or repairing previously approved conditions and dimensions a damaged or deteriorated structure or facility. Maintenance includes only those activities that do not significantly alter the assented design, purpose, and size of the structure. Maintenance provisions for marina in-water facilities and residential boarding facilities are found in blah, blah, blah.
But I guess that begs the question, are the size of the stones for the revetment part of the prior ascents? Yeah.
Existing stone?
There were 14
Yes.
changes to
Right.
the modified ascents.
Right.
So
They've always been restacked. And, this revetment's been here a long time, before 93.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've ever added stone, but they were never allowed to add stone. In fact, it would be stacked stone. What's there is
So the other ascents for maintenance, ascents
You know what I mean?
or just putting back
Yes.
the blocks for the existing revet. So, and this is the first time that they
Want to replace.
want to replace it and these larger
Actually, it's a lot.
stuff.
So is it a new wall?
Council, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you, members of the council, for hearing this tonight. So I'd like to just start out by saying that I'm in agreement with your legal counsel that this really is a legal question. Does this activity involving repairing this existing revetment, not increasing the footprint, not increasing the height, but changing out the stone that was discussed, does that qualify as maintenance? So you're not going to find a specific regulation in your red book that says, here's the stone. I think your counsel pointed to it in the colloquy with member Izzy. It's that definition that was read, and the relevant language is, does it significantly alter the assented design, purpose, and size of the structure? It's our position that it doesn't. What I'd like to do, with the chair's permission, is just start off with a little overview of why we think that, along with the history of how we got here. With me, I'm then going to ask some questions of Gus Cruzcamp. He is has his master's in coastal engineering. He's been performing coastal engineering for projects like this for 30 years, 20 years. So with that, I'd just like to give a quick overview of how we got to where we are. So this house has existed on this lot since the 1920s. And if you look at aerial photos, you can see a revetment in this location since at least 1954. I don't think there's any dispute on that with staff. So there is an existing revetment there. And as staff mentioned, there have been a number of maintenance ascents issued over the years for restacking the stone that's fallen down, collapsing. My clients purchased the property recently, and they originally applied for a maintenance ascent in 2024. The permit number on that is M2024-10-47. And the goal with that, they hired Gus, and the goal was that they wanted to build that up to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards, stop the collapsing of the revetment for a number of reasons, and I can get into that after, but just to lay out the history. So they applied and they were approved a maintenance program. Included in that were plans for the revetment, including cross sections showing the height, slope, footprint, all the details that would be required to show that it was maintenance. It was approved, but there was a condition put on that maintenance permit that said you are granted the one-time allowance to exchange 50 tons of stone, smaller size stone, for the larger stone. So with that, they got the project underway. They couldn't know until they dug into the soil whether they could work with that 50-ton limit to build it up to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards, which was part of the plans they submitted. When they dug into the soil, unfortunately, what they found out is that they couldn't work that limit. They couldn't build within the footprint, keep the same height, and meet U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards without replacing the stone. I also don't think there's any dispute with that aspect with staff either. So they did the right thing. They stopped the project. They went back to the CRMC and they said, look, we have this issue. We need to get relief from this condition and get our maintenance ascents that will allow us to rebuild this wall up to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards. It needs to be a maintenance application because, as your legal counsel pointed out, these are type 1 waters. A new revetment is not allowed. So
they filed that application to get relief from that condition. That initial application, we had discussions with staff. Staff indicated that they wouldn't support relief from the 50-ton limit. It was their opinion that if they exceeded the 50-ton limit that was in the original assent, it would go from being maintenance to being a new structure. We disagreed because there's not a regulation that sets out a 50-ton limit in the Red Book. So we decided to take it to you, which is why we're here. We also received the staff report. I apologize, we didn't put in our written comments response to some of the our written statement response to some of the staff report. We got that later beyond the 10-day submission deadline. But you know, to respond to it now, one of the points that were mentioned, I think was mentioned here again tonight, is there was concern that if this project was allowed and the stone was replaced and this was built as submitted, it would increase the reflectivity, which would increase the erosion, impede lateral access. So of course, when we saw that, the first thing I did, like Gus, and I said, Gus, is that true? Are we going to increase reflectivity with this? And he'll testify to this after, but his response was no, we are going to decrease reflectivity. And the reason he gave me, you know, I'm going to let Gus testify why that is, but the short answer is it will decrease reflectivity based on the change in scope. And the other point that I'd just like to point out is that the designs for this revetment were approved as a maintenance. If we dug up the soil and the soil would submit that, we would have built it, that revetment with the exact same reflectivity as designed would be built. So the only reason we're here, not because of reflectivity, Gus will tell you it's going to decrease, but it's actually going to be exactly the same as what was previously approved in 2024. It's only because of the soil that we dug up that wouldn't support the project that we need to ask for the snow. So our legal argument is pretty straightforward. The first is the revetment is within the same height and footprint of an existing revetment. And your definition says there needs to be a significant alteration to the design, purpose, or structure. We'd say it is not that, because all we're doing is increasing the stability of the revetment, decreasing the reflectivity. And really, it was mentioned by staff is that the reason the 50 stone allowance was originally allowed was for safety reasons. And they gave that allowance because of projectile stone. But there are other safety reasons. Because if you don't build it up to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards, Gus will testify to this, not only is there a danger of projectile stones, but there's also a danger of collapse. Now, there's been a number of collapses of the revetment over the years, which means lateral access in two different ways. First, it causes stones to be screwed along the beach, and it repeatedly requires equipment to go out to the beach to excavate and rebuild the stone. That equipment's out there, or the stone is getting on the beach. That will impede lateral access. So there's safety reasons, there's lateral access reasons, and of course, there's the reason that they just don't want to have to keep on rebuilding this wall again and again and again, when really all you should do is build it once, build it according to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards, and then it's done. We can never make it bigger, can't change it to increase the reflectivity in the future, but build it once, then it's done. And finally, as pointed out earlier, I think your legal counsel would agree with this, there is no regulation setting a 50-ton limit on stone when maintaining a revetment. It's only the general maintenance definition. Most maintenance, if you're within a coastal area, you need to maintain a structure. It requires replacing materials. If you're maintaining a house, you're not only going to build it with the wood that's on the site, you need to replace the materials. So that's the same rule that would apply here. We're just replacing some materials that don't work, that can't get it up to engineering. We're replacing with materials that would work, but we're staying within the tonnage, staying within the height, we're staying within. So some practical considerations. I know it is a legal question, but there are some practical considerations that we think of here. First is allowing the new stone to go in and allowing the structure to be built in accordance with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers standards. This, as stated previously, it's going to improve lateral access because we're not going to have equipment out on the beach, not going to have a collapsed revetment of stone that's going to be strewed in storm events. As Gus will testify, this is next to Atlantic Beach, and the revetment itself actually acts as what he referred to as, and I hadn't heard of this until he told me, acts as groin, which prevents erosion on Atlantic Beach. It's actually slowing down erosion on Atlantic Beach. Now, of course, there's a public safety public safety component with, although it may never happen, and we've been lucky to this point, never a revetment collapse, it could be a public safety concern. So with that, I'd just like to quickly touch on some issues that were raised by the members who were speaking with staff. Then I'll turn to Gus and put on the record some of those things that I just. So the first is, member Izzy asked, what's the impact of the stone size? The impact is going to be, it's going to allow us to build a revetment with a slope. Slopes the key feature that decreases reflectivity. It will allow us to build a revetment with a slope that will increase reflectivity. Or marginally, we're not going to say it's a huge impact, but marginally. There was a question about was stone ever allowed to be replaced in prior maintenance ascents? It has been. There's a maintenance ascent from 1999. It's mentioned in your staff report that mentions the replacement of stone. So it has been something that's done before, and it has been something that would have been allowed in the 2024 app, but only up to 50 tons. There was a statement by member Izzy, I believe, about the safety issues and the tossing of the stones. That was the reason for the 50-ton limit, but that's not the only safety concern. Tossing of stone was the safety concern, also collapsing. I believe member Flynn asked, staff clarified this. We're not increasing the total tonnage of the stone. That's correct. We're not increasing any total tonnage of the stone, not increasing the footprint, not increasing the. Member Reynolds asked about impact to lateral access. We think that this will improve lateral access because you're not going to be having a revetment that's not built up to engineering standards that could collapse, scatter the rocks, and then continually have equipment out on the beach, excavate, rebuild the revetment. People aren't going to want to access the beach laterally. It's continually a construction site. Member Fitzpatrick asked about, Mr. Fitzpatrick asked about infill, the revetment. I'm going to let Gus touch on that. And then member Russolino also mentioned lateral access concerns. Looking at the picture in the slide deck, and he's right, that picture does illustrate how the collapse of revetment impairs lateral access. So if there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I can switch over to Gus and have him get some things on for us.
Any questions of the attorney at this point from the council?
Yeah,
Mr. Flynn.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying that the design that you're proposing would decrease reflectivity.
That's correct.
Staff is of the opinion it would increase reflectivity.
So, and really, it's not that important. The person who's going to say it is the one with the master's degree in coastal engineering, 30 years of experience. And, why don't we just get that on?
Well, I have one other question for you. You're saying that the staff's advice on how to rebuild this wall would not be acceptable to the Army Corps of Engineers. Are you saying you would be denied a permit by the Army Corps of Engineers?
It doesn't require a permit from the
It does not require a permit.
It does not.
So it's their general guidance that you're saying.
It's
Okay, so we don't have two jurisdictions with different laws that you're caught in the middle of. That's, okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So Gus, I'd like to just start off by asking you about education.
So degree in civil engineering from Roger Williams College. A couple of years in Waterford engineering.
Talk a little louder, please.
Sorry. Just got my undergraduate degree from Roger Williams College, now university, in the early '90s. I worked a couple of years at a waterfront engineering firm in Connecticut, after which I went to University of Florida and studied coastal engineering, got my Master of Engineering. So during that time, I was research assistant to Dr. Robert Dean, probably one of the most well-known coastal engineers in the U.S.
And Gus, how long have you been working as a coastal engineer?
Since '97.
And have you worked on revetments in the past?
Yeah, I've worked on probably a couple dozen revetments over the years.
So I'm going to ask you just some questions to get your opinion. First, let me ask.
May I make a suggestion? Why don't you have Mr. Cruzcamp give narrative testimony? I think you set the table about what he's going to say. Let him say it, and then at the end he can give his opinion.
I can do that. And if there's anything I'd like to follow up on.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So this all started for me in 2020. Crohn's had purchased the property in 2019. In 2022, they went through their first restacking effort. Didn't go so well. So in the January of 2024, the revetment got damaged. So that's one of those they called engineering. I visited the site, inspected what they had. I also then went through the CRMC files to understand the history of the structure. Generally speaking, a lot of the stones and I shouldn't say a lot, but if you take a look at some of the photos that we have in the handout in particular, you'll see there's a number of areas. It's easy to pick out the larger stones, but if you look, you'll notice there's quite a few of the smaller stones. The problem is that not only is the size of the stone, but also the shape of the stone. The issue with that is it's really difficult to construct a revetment purely with these rounded smaller stones. We're joined here also by Sam Sharenzi of Sharenzi Excavation, who's done also has extensive experience with revetment construction, stone construction, the prior restacking effort, plus what was done most recently. After going through the history and looking at the makeup of the existing structure, I couldn't it was difficult for me to think of restacking again, meaning the insanity of having to I didn't want to be part of a design that's not going to last more than a year or two. I just didn't feel like that was responsible. So we went through and did further research on gauging what the wave climate is. We had Trenzia Associates do a detailed survey. It boggles my mind that none of the prior filings for this application for this site had any meaningful surveys or actual design information related to the structure. Granted, again, it's, as was mentioned previously, this structure is approximately 75 years old. Context. So after doing the research and all, and understanding some of the limitations, I went through, and the only real reference out there for technical reference for designing these type of structures is developed by the Army Corps of Engineers. That's why the designs are standard. We design the structure accordingly, and you have to understand stones are not a perfect thing. They vary in sizes and all, and the design accounts for that. If you look on our plans, you'll see in the last page we provide we call it gradation, or range and size of stones for that's needed for the construction, including the armor layer and the bedding layer. Bedding layer is the interior part. Typically, when you look at how a revetment is constructed, the toe stones which are the ones at the very bottom, are really the foundation of the structure. If they're not sized properly, and they're not set properly, if they get undermined, the whole structure fails. So we want to make sure that those are sized properly. This is based on what the Army Corps of Engineers provides us technical guidance in their various references. I'll also point out more recent things. In the fall, Mr. Lucia here and I interacted, and we agreed upon that our design is the size of the stone properly with consideration of the wave time. I have emails to that. So once we had everything sized, and also I should point out, per the survey, the profile of the structure is kind of like a hybrid. It starts off at closest to the land. It's like a one-on-one slope. And then as you go closer to the beach, it becomes a little bit more mild. So what I've done is in our design, I designed structure to fit exactly in the same footprint that we can see, and just average the slope. So instead of, especially on the backside, instead of a one-on-one, we're 1.5, meaning 1 foot vertical for every 1.5 horizontal. So it's slightly mild. If you think about reflectivity, what we were talking about earlier, reflection would be a lot more significant if it was a seawall, right? It's vertical. So the milder the slope, the less the reflection. It's that simple. Again, another key point I want to make too, related to the design of that structure, is it's only as strong as the weight and shape of the stones. If the stones are too small and rounded, think about like bowling balls, they're not going to key into them. And if they're too small, the wave energy is going to toss them. And unfortunately, that's why we have this continuous issue of having to restack the stones again. So I'm trying to do my best to manage that.
Chairman, if I could just ask some really quick, short questions. Thank you. Sure. There was mention of reflectivity. This design that you've submitted, increase or decrease?
It decreases because I'm making the slope, the front face of the slope of the revetment milder.
And how certain are you?
Certain.
Okay. Lateral access. You have an opinion based on your years of experience and education with this project, like lateral access?
Yeah, the displaced stones are falling into that lateral access way. So if we can build it properly and secure the stones within the structure, they won't impede the access as well as living safety. We don't want a section falling on a person.
So that's what I was gonna ask you next. Can you give me a professional opinion about the safety of this design as compared to what's there?
What's there is not as safe as what I'm saying, absolutely.
Can you explain why? Just please.
Because with stones, with essentially a dumped type of situation where there's gaps and cavities and holes, the structure is unstable. The applicants have done a good job trying to have signs to say no climbing on rocks, which I'm sure you guys all recognize. People don't always heed signs out, and it does create an unsafe situation.
Let me ask you about the prior application for 2024. Did you submit that application?
I did.
And could you tell me, are there any difference between the design you submitted in that application and this?
No.
So is the only difference that you need relief from the stone?
Yes, the larger stone to make up the difference, yes. And also the point is that, we had no way of knowing what the size of the toe stones were that are buried in each until we had our contractor perform the excavation, confirm what was there is not sufficient.
When you did the excavation and you found out that you couldn't on the limit, what did you do?
Interacted with Mr. Fitzpatrick, and we were told to file an application seeking permission to additional large stone.
So you didn't do any construction without permission?
Construction ceased.
No further questions.
Any questions from the council of the applicant at this point? Who wants to go first? I see you nodding.
I'll defer.
Okay, Ron.
What I got from Mr. Fitzpatrick, the solution regarding the reflection. The smaller stones have more voids, so that when the wave action occurs, that void space would be filled with the water from the waves. Versus a large stone with no voids, that wave action would hit the wall and reflect back.
Okay.
That accurate? Is that accurate? Is that kind of how you explained it?
That's how I explain it. And I like to also mention, in one of the areas that where the lateral access is I don't have the page number, but section CC is where the crux of where the lateral access is. Starting in section BB. In section CC, there is existing plans show that it is a 1-to-1 slope. It's got like a U-shaped convex concave shape to it. Well, now we're going to add stone. So now we're going to, as Thomas mentioned, it's going to be more filled out. It is going to be filled out along that face. So granted, they might have a less of a slope, but as you pointed out, it will have less void space. So there's less absorption of wave energy. So the waves reflect off these large stones. That's the case for BB actually shows a 1.5-to-1. That's not changing at all. So I don't see the change in slope there. So
Mr. Chairman, I just asked a quick question.
Oh, not yet. Let him finish his line of questioning.
That was it. That was confirmation. They mentioned.
Steve, you have questions?
Yeah, I do. I think you testified that you need to dig up the toe stones and replace them with larger stones. The ones that are there are too small.
So we've found, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to ignore that, then just there's a higher chance that they're going to be undermined, and I would feel like an idiot.
Okay. So that's a different design than what's there now.
It's as far as, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if that ever had really been officially designed.
May I comment?
I'm not saying that, no, you can't. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's different. And you're proposing to replace
the old stones with new stones.
Yeah, the total size of the structure cannot change.
Can you change the slope of the revetment using the current stones?
Because of their,
And again, I'm not saying it's the best design. I'm just saying, can that be accomplished?
so, no, and so it's, if you think about masonry seawalls, for example, right? Masonry seawalls are comprised of smaller stones that are held together. The reason that works is because the concrete holds them together so they act as one. In this situation with a dry set of stone in a wave environment, those stones are vulnerable to movement and they're not stable, stacked in that. The only way we could make them work would be two things. One is it would have to be a much milder slope, so requiring a much bigger footprint, or we'd have to like make it bind them all on concrete so it acts as one big solid structure. Those are to make. So, but I will say that you could use some of the smaller stone as part of the interior of the structure. Key is that the outer shell has to be the larger stone. So when the wave energy hits, it doesn't move those units.
And what's the current slope of the existing?
1-to-1.
Okay.
And again, I've tried to, because maybe it's convex, but the idea is essentially it's like two slopes, right? And I'm just trying to make one uniform, clean slope that's somewhat milder, especially in a much bigger wave climate, like during a big storm.
At the top?
At the upper half.
Yeah.
Which is what, like, when a big storm comes, that's the section that's really going to have an issue impact. Exactly. As far as the voids and all, I will say that although you may have slightly, a number of smaller voids between smaller stones, the larger armor units are everything. It's kind of like when you put a revetment together, it's a puzzle. Again, you're not using perfect size, like 3¼ foot diameter boulders, setting them stacked. It's a mixture, and as part of the puzzle, especially when it comes to the inner bedding material, everything is size. So like the larger the armor stone, you do have larger gaps in between stones. As long as in that works, provided your bedding material, the material underneath it is slightly larger, so it doesn't escape. So everything is kind of relative to one another.
Can you just reiterate or explain then how the excavation work that you did on the site altered your design thinking? What needed to be done to prepare this well?
Yeah, so if you notice on the plans, we have existing cross sections and proposed cross sections. On the existing cross sections, you can see what I was trying to mimic generally the situation through the size and precariousness of those of the stones in a couple different scenarios. What you'll also note is the toe stone is, I can only see what's on the surface during an inspection based on survey, photos and all. I couldn't see what was below the surface. So it wasn't until Mr. Schranzia had got an excavator out there to excavate around and extract that toe and realize that this is not what meets like a stable. This would not support a stable structure.
Now, when that was done, was there an opportunity for staff to go out and look at that area to see for themselves what that looked like? And I have a follow-up question.
I don't believe they were called time. No, but but we were, because we were still, at the time, we were acting within a permit to proceed. Since that was what was.
Can I comment?
If it's answering that question, yes.
Actually, not really, because we're talking about the experts right now.
Yeah.
It's on the maintenance permit, so I think we have to keep it at the expert level.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to question if that's the excavation started. Gus, our contractor, that's Renzius, and all of us that on site. Then we immediately called Tom, and Tom came out to the site that day.
Thank you, yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Gus is just not remembering correctly.
I beg your pardon. Thank you.
That's it.
Apologies.
And again, there was an assumption that there were the large throw stones under there. 50 tons is sufficient to put in adequate toe stones. And that's what we discovered was not the case. That was not, that's what was relayed to me as the homeowner. Is that we assumed we had the larger stones at the toe, very surface. And their opinions, which we're relying on, is we don't have enough stone. We only excavated in a very distant portion of the stone. We wouldn't have started the project if we knew we didn't have enough stone to begin with. But we couldn't.
Okay, Mr. Cronin, you kind of get beyond the original point. I just want to keep this thing moving along. I know Mr. Flynn has another question.
And well, one question for you guys. So after you noticed what it did notice, you stopped the construction at that point. So did I get that correctly? You didn't proceed with trying to replace anything. So,
No, we had replaced for the first 75 feet. We had completed 75 feet, and we used that those 42 tons of stone to complete that 75 feet.
question for staff. If you had been out there to see what they saw when they did excavation, if you had had the opportunity to do you think there's any possibility that that would change your review of what they are trying to do? Is there anything you think you could learn from seeing subsurface stones that would not be visible to the naked eye that would change how you would look at an application going forward? Or is that totally irrelevant from your perspective?
Well, Tom actually said
Yes,
he was there.
if I may, I did receive the phone call. It was a Friday afternoon. I drove to the site and I noticed, and I don't want to get beside the point, I noticed non-conformities to my 20. And I shut down the site that day. There were issues. When I was out there, and to really get to your question, the answer is it would not. If the toe stone was undersized, this is a grandfathered structure. We are not trying to design an Army Corps of Engineer wall where one was never constructed. This is a grandfathered structure. They can rebuild it as is. And had they found no toe stone, our opinion would have been no different. They can reconstruct in kind to current standards. But to make a larger toe stone, that would require a development. That would require a better structure than was designed and is out there. So had there been no toe stones discovered, had that been brought up and addressed, it would not have changed the opinion of staff.
One other follow-up question. If this was not a type 1 waterway, would that affect your review of the design?
Yes, sir, of course. In type 2, it is permittable to apply for changes to structural shortening or enhancing them. In type 1, it is not. Thank you.
Any further questions from council?
Chairman, if I could just have a couple quick questions of Gus, and then just do a quick 2-sentence summary. So, Gus, the first question I'm going to ask you is that you heard staff reference Plan BB and Plan CC that gave them some pause. Are those the same plans that were approved as a maintenance in 2024?
The same sections EB and CC were the identical presented prior application, yes.
Okay. And just to put a fine point on it, is your opinion that the key factor in determining reflectivity is slope?
Slope is the key aspect, yes, in terms of yes.
And I think you said this to Mr. Rizzi. But so I'm clear, could you achieve this slope, decrease reflectivity without the stone?
So can you repeat that?
Could you achieve the slope that would decrease reflectivity? That's
So yeah, without expanding the footprint, no.
okay. All right, without expanding. So that's all the questions I have. And if there aren't any other questions for me, I just sum up by saying that no, we're not asking for a variance. We're not asking for an exception. We're just asking for an application of the regulations that you already have, which happen to make good sense in this case in any event. I know that the staff got caught up on, well, you can't replace more than 50 tons of stone. If you wanted to pass a regulation that put a 50-ton stone cap on revetment repair in type 1 waters or anywhere else, you could, but you don't have that now. Right now, it just says maintenance is repairing an existing structure that does not significantly alter size, design, purpose. This size, design, and purpose was approved in 2024 as maintenance. It just turns out that we couldn't build it at the right soil. So that's all I have.
I can just throw in another point of perspective is with the tonnage that we're proposing, we're looking, it would replace essentially between 7 and 11% of the stones that make up the structure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anyone present this evening that wishes to speak on this application? Yes, Mr. Palazzolo.
Would you all mind sitting back so that those members of the public that wish to speak can come and sit down? Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Now, Mr. Palazzolo, I know that you're a licensed attorney in other jurisdictions. The reason I'm swearing you in is because you're not here as an attorney. You're here for yourself, as you said in your objection, and that's why I'm swearing you in, because you'll be testifying to facts. But I'm going to ask you to confine your comments to the issue at hand as to whether or not this application qualifies as an application for a maintenance permit.
Not my objection. I don't care whether it's called a maintenance application or not. My understanding is that the staff has determined that the requested changes will harden this revetment, thereby increase, accelerate, thereby decrease access. Under those circumstances, I'd say that the applicant is requesting that they modify their revetment in such a way that will create a burden external to their property. They're creating a negative externality of erosion that reduces lateral access. Under those circumstances, I think you have the authority to condition grant of this application on dedication of a right of way along the boundary of their property. The reason is that under Dolan versus California Coastal Council and Dolan versus City of Tigard, the United States Supreme Court has said that you're allowed to condition permits that proportionally alleviate
problems that would arise and occur to grant the permit. You're not allowed to require an applicant to do something completely unrelated to what they're asking for. You're not allowed to ask the applicant for something that's disproportionate to what they're asking. But if they're asking for something that's going to create some harm, you're allowed to condition the grant of that permit on something that will alleviate that harm in proportion to the harm. And what I'm proposing here is that if you determine this is not a maintenance application, go ahead and deny the application. If you determine that this is a maintenance application, you still have the authority to condition grant of the permit on the granting of a public access along the strip that is presently 6-foot private right of way on the west side of their property. Why? Why would they do that? Well, the thing that they're asking for is going to reduce access along that strip. If they're willing to give you public right of way along the western boundary, that alleviates the problem that they've caused. They're hastening the date on which nobody's going to be able to walk past their limit. At least they should be willing to help people walk from the beach to Atlantic Avenue, along Atlantic Avenue, and then back to the beach around their property. If you're going to cut people off, at least help them walk around a little bit. Now, is the proposal disproportionate to the harm that they're going to cause? I don't think so. In fact, I think it's the least thing anyone could ever ask to alleviate the condition that they're going to cause. Why? Because their plan already allows for a clear 6-foot strip. I'm not asking them to change their plan in any way. Their plan already says it's going to be left open. Great. It's spaced a good 40 feet from their house. It's not like you're going to have people looking in their window. It doesn't cost them a damn thing. It doesn't cost them a penny. All they're doing is allowing a greater group of people to walk where they were going to allow others to walk anyway. They don't have to change the plan. They don't have to spend any money making it better for any reason in any way. It's literally doesn't cost them a thing. That's not disproportionate. Now, to really makes this important is the town of Westerly's hostility toward rights of way. You don't have to take my word for it. But yeah, well, right now there's two rights of ways near their property: Maplewood Avenue and Atlantic Avenue West. They're both town designated rights of way.
Mr. Palazzolo, you made a good point, but now you're straying. We got to stick to this application.
What I would like to explain to you is that requested public right of way is not merely redundant. It's not merely superfluous. I myself would say it's not a problem, guys. If I felt the Atlantic Avenue West right of way had a snowball's chance of hell of surviving the next 5 years, if that right of way is fine, problem. People can just use that one. But now, town of Westerly's put a target on that right of way as they have all East Beach rights of ways. I think you need to know about it. I would like to tell you, I brought material. This is important.
Okay, but the council has a discrete issue in front of it. And that's what has to be discussed. And I'm concerned, by the way, under the Open Meetings Act, that now we're straying beyond this particular application. So you made a good point, but I know that there's other people that want to speak on this too, to this issue.
I totally say what you allow me to say. But I'm trying to sound the alarm here that the only right of way that is safe in the town of Westerly is one that the town of Westerly has not yet got its hands on. In ways you can't even begin to know. Manatuck Avenue, you think you got a state right of way there? You think that's worth anything? As we speak, these people already have a plan to make that worthless, but you won't let me tell you about it.
Well, not in connection with this. That'd be a violation of 42, 46-3.
Okay,
But if there's someone else that would like to speak on this application, I think there's some others.
I've made it proper. I'd like to tell you why it's imperative that we get this right of way, and you denied me, so be it. Thank you.
Anyone else present this evening that wishes to speak? Mrs. Dodge?
State and spell again, or sworn in again?
Yes, you do. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Again, because it's a different application, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Absolutely. It's Christopher Dodge, CHRISTOPHER Thank you again, Mr. Chair, Council, for the opportunity to talk. I just want to be clear regarding comments, because I had some prepared regarding all of our objections to the application. At the moment, we're just addressing whether or not this is considered maintenance or new. Is that my understanding?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I would be fairly short and sweet, and I apologize for the computer because to be frank, didn't expect to be able to have an opportunity to talk tonight, given that I was in agreement with staff and the public notice that the scope of this work should not be considered maintenance, it should be considered a new wall, and therefore would not even be eligible to be a category B ascent and be in front of you for your consideration. So I put just a couple notes together real quick. So, no, we agree with staff again that this application should not be considered goes outside the scope of maintenance and should be considered new. You know, he mentioned some of our objections, mainly, well, I guess the main issue at hand for you guys to consider is just if I'm using the council's own analogy previously about building a house. This is not simply just building a house using some new materials and not using the materials that are on site already. This would be completely demolishing the house and then bringing in all brand new materials, which to me doesn't sound like maintaining that house. You know, if I'm understanding the regulations, CRMC defines maintenance as reconstructing or repairing to previously approved conditions and dimensions of a damaged or deteriorated structure or facility. And also, quote, includes only those activities that do not significantly alter the assented design, purpose, and size of the structure. That's the aforementioned 1.1.2 A83. As mentioned by staff, the proposed design is different from current conditions. And my reading of that is to not significantly alter the assented design. My understanding would be this would be going back to the 93 approved new, which also, I mean, I wasn't in this position at the time. I was barely out of grade school at the time. It was interesting to me that a new structural shoreline protection facility had already been approved at this location, despite the prohibition being in place at that time. But my reading is that nothing could be proposed that doesn't alter that alters the design approved in 1993. And I haven't looked at that design, but having looked at the aerial imagery available to me, I haven't gone out and taken measurements or anything like that, but this facility, this structural shoreline protection facility, appears to have already grown in scope over the course of however many maintenances Mr. Lucian mentioned, and had additional portions added to it down the middle of this facility, separating portions of the lot from each other. So it already looks like it's changed over time. So I would again just agree with staff that this to me appears in no way to be maintenance and should be considered a new facility, which is expressly prohibited on undeveloped coastal beaches in type 1 water. So it should be denied for consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present this evening that wishes to speak on the application before us? Okay. Just going to give Rich or Tom a final word on this. If there's anything you'd like to.
Let me just hearing all this stuff. There is a mention of the slope of the structure. You got to be aware, and it's not what they want to hear, is that they could reduce the slope even further. They'd have to reduce the slope into going towards the house. They have a patio that exists there. It's that could actually reduce where the Army Corps of Engineer reduces the size of the stone that's required. But that's one option. That would also reduce the reflection from the wave energy on reduce like he was mentioning that they're going to reduce the slope, and that's what happens when you reduce slopes if you don't have as much reflectivity. So there is rules that you see there's a patio that exists at the house, but they'd have to lose some of the patio. That was mentioned before when something decided to go ahead and do it. Go ahead and pass that.
Mr. Flynn.
But wouldn't that be a change in design?
Well, there you go. That's the crux. So if you went back and if you're changing, if they kept the same size stone, at least it's the same size stone, and you're not making using margins structure itself.
But the design of the structure would be changed if they altered it in that direction. I understand the point you're making, but I still think they'd be stuck, given its type 1 waters. If it would be changed in the design. Okay.
Tom, anything?
Yes, Mr. Chair, for me. There were numerous points I want to go over. One, Rich, of course, is correct about the slope and being able to move back. We have on many maintenance applications, even in type 1 waters, allowed revetments to move back slightly over time, and banks get eroded, and we allow them to move back. We consider it the same structure, but as dirt erodes behind it, we have allowed some of those. So it could potentially be considered. I would just like to submit that. The items I really wanted to address was one, the 1993 assent did not actually give this, was not for the revetment. It was for a concrete wall behind the revetment that was never constructed. So that 93 assent actually didn't pertain to these stones. The stones that are out there are kept entirely on grandfathering. Their grandfather, there was no council assent. The 99 assent that was referenced, restacking where stone was added, it did not state that. It did say replacing stone, but explicitly in the permit, it stated no new stone. So there has been no restacking permit. We've gone through them, Rich and I both, and none of them have allowed new stone ever in this area. The 2024 permit, I was the primary engineer working on that permit. I worked for a long time with Gus because he is correct. This is a very complicated site. And I worked my best to find any way that we could help the applicants while still meeting regulations. I had to tell them that by changing stone, we were not going to be able to do this as a maintenance. Restacking could be allowed, but what I want to say is that in that 24 assent, they cite that the plans were approved. The plans were not approved. I'd like that very clear. I cut out those plans under stipulation A in the maintenance assent, and I'll read it very, very briefly. It's only sentences. But basically, I gutted those plan sets because they're flat out not allowed. I quoted it as maintenance activities are limited to removing unpermitted concrete, that's a separate problem that we were getting addressed, restacking of existing stone to pre-existing conditions, and installing a stone drainage layer behind the armor stones. That is all I allowed. That plan set showed new stone, a slope change, added toe stone. All of that was nullified when I wrote that stipulation. So the reason the plans are still approved is because they show the drainage layer behind the armor stone. That we do historically allow people to add behind some revetments. If there's absolutely no drainage layer behind there, the dirt will just keep coming out. There was no drainage layer. So when they say that the plans in 2024 were approved, they absolutely were not. And I explicitly stated that it could not be approved under those conditions. So I wrote stipulations to specifically block that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the 50 tons of projectile stone, because that's a very important part of the argument that they're bringing up. Gus and I also discussed it, whether it could do with the exchanging of stone. I told him no, and my reasons for no were very clear. Most of the items we discussed today. However, there was some concern about the severely undersized stones being projectiles. We only, in very few occasions, allow any measure of exchanging stone in type 1. One of them is projectiles that are very tiny. These stones are yay large, and up against the Atlantic Ocean, they do get chucked around and they get thrown on the barrier. So we don't want them on the barrier. We also don't want it on, going into your house. The second case is sometimes you get old concrete revetments that have rebar sticking out. We let them exchange for granite. It's much better than the rebar. But those are separate, and we do allow those historically, but those have nothing to do with fundamentally changing a revetment to change its structural stability. So I wanted to mention that because they keep bringing up this 50 ton of stone saying that this was some kind of armoring of the toe stones. It absolutely was not. And I refused to give them that because that's what they originally asked for. 50 tons is only for projectile stones, very small stones. And I would also add that these small stones were added in 2023 and should not have been added. And it's another enforcement issue we're looking at on the site. Many of these stones here were never allowed and were installed in 2023, as well as the concrete, which is a separate issue that we're handling. I think I only have one other item, and I thank you for your patience. The replacing of materials. So one of the arguments I keep hearing presented is that seawalls need materials replaced. That's true if you have a concrete seawall. Concrete deteriorates, rebar rusts. We all know about those problems. That is not true for riprap revetments. The granite itself is fine. These are the same stones that have been out there. We do not frequently upgrade sizes of stone on a revetment as regular maintenance. What it's doing is what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve an engineering problem of erosion. But what you're really doing is you are trying to increase the size of your revetment to meet the increased design needs because you have a very exposed house right up against the Atlantic Ocean. So I completely disagree with that engineering argument that riprap revetments are something that you should frequently be replacing stone. That's not true. Stone gets displaced, but the material itself, there's nothing wrong with the granite. It's going to last for 1,000 years. The granite itself is there. It can get occasionally chipped, but the granite itself doesn't need replacement. It needs restacking, and the applicant would like to key in this revetment. If you've been out there, I've been out there 4 or 5 times myself while we were some of it while troubleshooting and trying to come up with a good solution. This revetment has a massive voids. I mean, very, very large voids. And what you would do to stabilize this revetment so it stops keep falling over is you need to key it in. And that's really what they're trying to do is they want to build a keyed in revetment, a properly structured revetment. And that does increase reflecting. I agree with the slope comments. The slope absolutely does reduce slope. But if you key in a revetment, as Mr. Gagnon was mentioning earlier, he's dead on right. By keying in your revetment, you're creating a solid wall. So there's actually two factors at play here, and I don't necessarily with the opinion that there's no way that this could increase erosion in front of the revetment. It very well could. Which factor is going to weigh heavily, the keying or the slope? The slope change is proposed is relatively minor. The keying in is actually a pretty large degree of what is the proposal. I would reckon that the keying is going to dominate, and it's probably going to increase erosion. And there's a reason, Rich, Jeff and I, we've all discussed this. We discussed this with our primary geologist while looking at the structure. She was in complete agreement. So I think those are my main points.
Okay, thank you. Prior to turning it over to my counsel, I need a 2-minute break. Okay. Anyone else that needs to vote?
I have some discussion. Go ahead. First of all, I want to say that I am very sympathetic to the applicant's position. They bought a property with a revetment wall. It's 75 years old, and apparently it's designed 75-year-old engineering standards. And if you were building a new revetment wall in front of that house, you do it different. I understand that. But we're confined by the rules and regulations of the CRMC, one of which prohibits new structures, type 1 and limits existing changes to those structures to maintenance of what's existing. Maintenance is not only the footprint and the size of the existing wall. It's also the design. And even the applicant's engineer conceded that a lot of what they're proposing is a change in design. Digging up the toe stones, replacing them with larger toe stones. He said it was a change in the design, changing the existing slope of the revetment wall, which is 1-to-1. Now changing it to 1-to-1 at the bottom and 1-to-1 at the top is a change in the design. What we have is essentially prior non-conforming use or prior non-conforming structure. It doesn't allow substantive changes. It only our rules and regs only allow maintenance and reconstructing or repairing the existing structures. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest design in the world. That's what you have to put back. You gotta put back what's there. From what I can tell, that's why. Made the motion. The interpretation. CRMC STEM. See.
Any further discussion? No, I will poll the council. Mr. Flynn.
Aye.
Mr. Izzy.
Aye.
Mr. Russolino.
Aye.
Dr. Ruder.
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon.
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds.
Aye.
I too, Raymond Coy, vote aye for the reasons enumerated in the motion. Thank you. Next matter on our agenda is executive session. I entertain a motion to go with the executive session.
Motion to go to executive
Is
session.
there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we'll be going into an executive session.
Dinner waiting.
Past it was ready. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session, please. Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. I don't think there's action that we need to take on discussions here because it's for informational purposes. I don't think there's another motion that we have to do as it relates to any action taken because it was for informational purposes only. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes.
And having nothing else to come before us, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion made and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Just don't.